Hi guys, and welcome back to class. Today, I want you to ask yourself, based on your knowledge of this time period and the photograph of the 1960s sit-in in Greensboro, North Carolina, what do you know about lunch counter sit-ins? So I want you to look at this photograph, and I want you to ask yourself, based off of what you see, what do you know about sit-ins from this time frame of the 1960s? How might this sit-in relate to your discussion of social media as a strategy for social change? Our essential question for this lesson is, how do people affect social change? And our focusing question, what strategies do people use to affect social change? And our content framing question in our organized stage says, what's happening in small change? So I'm going to have the small change located link inside of Schoology for you guys to read. And when you read it, I want you to ask yourselves, what do you notice and wonder about small change? At 4:30 in the afternoon on Monday, February 1st, 1960, 4 college students sat down at a lunch counter at the Woolworth in downtown Greensboro, North Carolina. They were freshmen at North Carolina A&T, a black college a mile or so away. "I'd like a cup of coffee, please," one of the 4, Ezell Blair, said to the waitress. "We don't serve Negroes here," she replied. The Woolworth lunch counter was a long L-shaped bar that could seat 66 people with a stand-up snack bar at one end. The seats were for whites. The snack bar was for blacks. Another employee, a black woman who worked at the steam table, approached to the students and tried to warn them. "You're acting stupid, ignorant," she said. They didn't move. Around 5:30, the front doors to the store were locked. The 4 still didn't move. Finally, they left by the side door. Outside, a small crowd had gathered, including a photographer from the Greensboro Record. "I'll be back tomorrow with A&T College," one of the students said. By the next morning, the protests had grown to 27 men and 4 women, most from the same dormitory as the original 4. The men were dressed in suits and ties. The students had brought their schoolwork and studied as they sat on the counter. On Wednesday, students from Greensboro Negro Secondary School Dudley High joined in, and the number of protesters swelled to 80. By Thursday, the protesters numbered 300, including 3 white women from the Greensboro campus of the University of North Carolina. By Saturday, the sit-in had reached 600. People spilled out into the street. White teenagers waved Confederate flags. Somehow, someone threw a firecracker. At noon, the A&T football team arrived. "Here comes the wrecking crew," one of the white students shouted. By the following Monday, sit-ins had spread to Winston-Salem 25 miles away and Durham 50 miles away. The day after that, students at Fayetteville State Teachers College and at Johnson C. Smith's College in Charlotte joined in, and followed on Wednesdays by students at St. Augustine's College and Shaw University in Raleigh. On Thursday and Friday, the protests crossed state lines, surfacing Hampton and Portsmouth, Virginia, and Rock Hill, South Carolina, and Chattanooga, Tennessee. By the end of the month, there were sit-ins throughout the South, as far west as Texas. I asked every student I met what the first day of the sit-ins had been like on campus, the political theorist Michael Walzer wrote in Dissent. The answer was always the same. It was like a fever. And I'm going to stop right here because we talked about this yesterday in our yesterday's lesson, where we talked about a frame. So right here, this quote right here is a frame. They quote it. They said that a political theorist said it, so you're going to believe them because they have a high title. So you framed it by telling who said it, given their title, and saying what they said. So this is another frame that was used in this article. Some 70,000 students eventually took part. Thousands were arrested and untold thousands more radicalized. These events in the early 60s became a civil rights war that engulfed the South for the rest of the decade, and it happened without email, texting, Facebook, or Twitter. The world, we are told, is in the midst of a revolution. The new tools of social media have reinvented social activism. With Facebook and Twitter and the like, the traditional relationship between political authority and popular will has been upended, making it easier for the powerless to collaborate, coordinate, and give voice to their concerns. When 10,000 protesters took to the streets in Moldova in the spring of 2009 to protest against their country's communist government, the action was dubbed the Twitter Revolution, because of the means by which the demonstrators had been brought together. A few months after that, when student protests rocked Tehran, the State Department took the usual step of asking Twitter to suspend scheduled maintenance of its website because the administration didn't want such a critical organizing tool out of service at the height of the demonstrations. Without Twitter, the people of Iran would not have felt empowered and confident to stand up for their freedom and democracy. Mark Palifal, a former national security advisor, later wrote, calling for Twitter to be nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize. Where activists were once defined by their causes, they are now defined by their tools. Facebook warriors go online to push change. You are best hope for us all, James K. Glassman, a former senior State Department official, told a crowd of cyber activists at a recent conference sponsored by Facebook, AT&T, Howcast, MTV, and Google. Sites like Facebook, Glassman said, give the U.S. a significant competitive advantage over terrorists. Some time ago, I said that Al-Qaeda was eating our lunch on the internet. That is no longer the case. Al-Qaeda is stuck in Web 101. The internet is now interactivity and conversation. These are strong and puzzling claims. Why does it matter who is eating whose lunch on the internet? Are people who log on to their Facebook page really the best hope for us all? As for Moldova's so-called Twitter revolution, Evgeny Mozavar, a scholar at Stanford who has been the most persistent of the digital evangelism's critics, points out that Twitter had scant internal significance in Moldova, a country where very few Twitter accounts exist. Nor does it seem to have been a revolution, not least because of protest, as Ann Applebaum suggested in the Washington Post, may well have been a bit of stagecraft cooked up by the government. The rest of the article will be online, but you're writing down what you notice and wonder about small change. Then I want you to talk about what are the key ideas in the first 9 paragraphs. You are only going to be doing a section, and you're going to write a 1 or 2 summary of each section, just like we did in the other previous article. Then ask yourself, based on paragraphs 5 and 6, what do you know about the lunch counter sit-ins? Now looking at the second sentence of paragraph 7. The new tools of social media have reinvented social activism. Gladwell. Gladwell's sources present varying views on the claim. Which quotations, in fact, support the claim? The new tools of social media have been reinvented social activism, and which quotations and the facts contradict the claim? Does Gladwell agree or disagree with the claim? The new tools of social media have been reinvented social activism, and cite sentences to support your response. How does the structure of the first 9 paragraphs relate to the claim? We seem to have forgotten what activism is. Then write a 1-sentence response to the following question. What is Gladwell's point of view on social media as a strategy for creating social change? Now I want us to look back at the ladder that we looked at prior. How do the size and the shape of the sculpture affect a viewer's perception? Remember that it's 36 feet tall, almost 2 feet wide, and just over an inch wide at the top. What might it feel like to try to climb this ladder? How could the shape of the sculpture affect a viewer's perception? What words would you use to describe a factory-made ladder? What words would you use to describe the sculpture of a ladder? And we're talking about this ladder here. Why might some people still make things by hand that could be made by machines or factories? Now let's look at these two definitions. We have representational art, which is a noun, and abstract art, which is also a noun. Representational art is art that depicts objects as they appear in real life. An abstract art is art that does not attempt to represent things as they appear in life. So if you look at this, is this abstract or is it representational? What might this connection suggest about the sculpture's relationship to representational or abstract art? How does the example of a lunch counter sit-in relate to Gladwell's point of view about social media as a strategy for social change? To end this lesson, in our content framing question and our organize stage, what's happening in small change? And for our exit ticket, how does the example of a lunch counter sit-in relate to Gladwell's point of view about social media as a strategy for social change? The homework for tonight is to reread paragraphs 1 through 9. So you're not reading that whole article of small change even in today's lesson. You're only reading paragraphs 1 through 9 and working on your fluency. Now on to our vocabulary deep dive. We're looking at the word radicalized. I want you guys to read paragraph 7 of the article Small Change and ask yourselves to cite words from the paragraph that are particularly important to the idea of social change, and then explain how each word is relevant to the idea of affecting social change. So for example, the word sit-ins is very relevant to creating social change. Protests are very important to representing social change. What other words can you find that support social change? Now look at the word radicalized in paragraph 6. Thousands were arrested and untold thousands more radicalized. The word radicalized means to cause someone to become an advocate of far-reaching, sometimes extreme political or social change. How does your knowledge of the exact definition of radicalized change your understanding of this original sentence? Now I want you to draft a sentence about Claudette Colvin using the word radicalized in your response.